book of 1 Samuel, page 293 in these Bibles. 1 Samuel chapter 21. 1 Samuel chapter 21. And we're going to read 1 Samuel chapter 21 and 1 Samuel chapter 22. So it's two chapters in 1 Samuel. And if you've got that page 293 in these, the green and kind of, what is that, turquoise? The turquoise Bibles. There you go. You got that there? 1 Samuel 21. So, it says, David here went to Nob to Ahimelech the priest. Ahimelech trembled when he met him and asked, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" Now, let's just ask a question. Is David the king at this point? Does anyone know? David is not the king at this point. In fact, he's on the run from the king. Does anyone know who the king was? Saul. He's running away from Saul. And Ahimelech, the priest, has come out saying, "Why are you alone? Why is no one with you?" David answered, Ahimelech the priest, "The king sent me on a mission and said to me, 'No one is to know anything about the mission I'm sending you on. As for my men, I have told them to meet me at a certain place. Now then, what have you to hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread or whatever you can find." But the priest answered David, "I don't have any ordinary bread to hand. However, there is some consecrated bread here, provided the men have kept themselves from women." David replied, "Indeed, women have been kept from us, as usual, whenever I set out. The men's bodies are holy, even on missions that are not holy. How much more so today?" So the priest gave him the consecrated bread, since there was no bread there except the bread of the presence that had been removed from before the Lord and replaced by hot bread on the day it was taken away. Now, one of Saul's servants was there that day, detained before the Lord. He was Doeg the Edomite, Saul's chief shepherd. David asked Ahimelech, "Don't you have a spear or sword here? I haven't brought my sword or any other weapon," because the king's mission was urgent. The priest replied, "The sword of Goliath, the Philistine whom you killed in the valley of Elah, is here. It's wrapped in a cloth behind the ephod. If you want it, take it. There is no sword here but that one." David said, "There is none like it. Give it to me." That day David fled from Saul and went to Achish, king of Gath. But the servants of Achish said to him, "Isn't this David, the king of the land? Isn't he the one they sing about in their dances? Saul has slain his thousands, and David his tens of thousands." David took these words to heart and was very much afraid of Achish, king of Gath. So he feigned insanity in their presence. And while he was in their hands, he acted like a madman, making marks on the doors of the gate and letting saliva run down his beard. Achish said to his servants, "Look at the man. He's insane. Why bring him to me? Am I so short of madmen that you have to bring this fellow here to carry on like this in front of me? Must this man come into my house?" David left Gath and escaped to the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and his father's household heard about it, they went down to him there. All those who were in distress or in debt or discontented gathered around him, and he became their commander. About 400 men were with him. From there, David went to Mizpah in Moab and said to the king of Moab, "Would you let your father and mother come and stay with you until I learn what God will do for me?" So he left them with the king of Moab, and they stayed with him as long as David was in the stronghold. But the prophet Gad said to David, "Do not stay in the stronghold. Go into the land of Judah." So David left and went to the forest of Hereth. Now Saul heard that David and his men had been discovered. And Saul was seated, spear in hand, under the tamarisk tree on the hill of Gibeah, with all his officials standing at his side. He said to them, "Listen, men of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give you give all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make all of you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is that why you have all conspired against me? No one tells me when my son makes a covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is concerned about me or tells me that my son has incited my servant to lie in wait for me, as he does today. But Doeg the Edomite, who was standing with Saul's officials, said, I saw the son of Jesse come to Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, at Nob. Ahimelech inquired of the Lord for him. He also gave him provisions and the sword of Goliath the Philistine. And the king sent for the priest Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, and all the men of his family who were the priests of Nob, and they all came to the king. And Saul said, Listen now, son of Ahitub. Yes, my lord, he answered. Saul said to him, Why have you conspired against me, you and the son of Jesse, giving him bread and a sword and inquiring of God for him, so that he has rebelled against me and lies in wait for me as he does today? Ahimelech answered the king, Who of all your servants is as loyal as David, the king's son-in-law, captain of your bodyguard, and highly respected in your household? Was that day the first time I have inquired of God for him? Of course not. Let not the king accuse your servant or any of his father's family, for your servant knows nothing at all about this whole affair. But the king said, You shall surely die, Ahimelech, you and your whole family. Then the king ordered the guards at his side, Turn and kill the priests of the Lord, because they too have sided with David. They knew he was fleeing, yet they did not tell me. But the king's officials were unwilling to raise a hand to strike the priests of the Lord. The king then ordered Doeg, You turn, strike down the priests. So Doeg the Edomite turned and struck them down. That day he killed 85 men who wore the linen ephod. He also put to the sword Nob, the town of the priests, with its men and women, its children and infants, and its cattle, donkeys, and sheep. But one son of Ahimelech, son of Ahitub, named Abiathar, escaped and fled to join David. He told David that Saul had killed the priests of the Lord. Then David said to Abiathar, That day, when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would be sure to tell Saul. Now, I am responsible for the death of your whole family. Stay with me. Don't be afraid. The man who wants to kill you is trying to kill me too. You'll be safe with me. So the scene is set, and the scene is tense. We have, in verse 1, we had Ahimelech, who's described in this story. He's actually similar to Saul's son. What was the name of Saul's son? Do you remember? Jonathan is one of the most attractive people described in the whole Bible, a man of such integrity and humility, and also of initiative, a man who, when he has the kingdom in his hand, he has the kingdom in his future, he says, it'll be yours, David. He makes covenants with David. He's a man of extraordinary integrity. He also, when he's with his armor bearer, he has already won his armor bearer's heart over, such that when they hear that there's a garrison of Philistines in a certain place, he says to his armor bearer, let's go and attack these guys. And the armor bearer doesn't say, sir, but his armor bearer says, I'm with you, heart and soul. This is a prince who wins the people around him, a man of such character and integrity. And here, Ahimelech, when he's first mentioned, he's described not as smiling, but as what? See that in verse 1? How was he? He was trembling. Why are you alone, David? Why is no one with you? Now, was he completely alone? Well, you can see from the story that he had some people with him, these young men. But Ahimelech is talking about, well, who usually are you with, David? The captain of the king's bodyguard? Why are you not with the king? See, Ahimelech knows what's going on. He knows David's reputation. The servants of Achish had said, is not this David, the king of the land? Did they not sing to one another of him in dances? Saul has struck down his thousands, David his tens of thousands. He has a reputation. He is known, and Ahimelech knows all about it. This is David, who struck down Goliath. And he knows that Saul is aware of a competitor. A great contest is building up in Israel. Everyone can see it. We saw at the beginning of the next chapter, David departed from there, escaped to the cave of Adullam, and when his brothers and all his father's house heard, they went down there to him. And everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was bitter in soul gathered to him, and he became commander over them. And there were with him about 400 men. We have a picture here of tension, which everyone is aware of. And we have a man at the heart of it who comes out, a father and a priest, trembling. Saul is the next man in the story. And he said, verse 7 of the first chapter there, listen, men of Benjamin, will the son of Jesse give all of you fields and vineyards? Will he make all of you commanders of thousands and commanders of hundreds? Is that why you have all conspired against me? No one tells me when my son makes the covenant with the son of Jesse. None of you is concerned about me, or tells me that my son has incited my servant to lie in wait for me, as he does this day. Now, Ahimelech and everyone knows the reality of this situation. Has David actually conspired against Saul? Is none really concerned about Saul? And is David actually lying in wait for him? None of this is true. It has been said that if the sins that people used to fall into in the last generations were immorality, alcoholism, and so on, a major temptation for pastors now is just dissipation, just wasting time. I want to propose this not just pastors. If the sins into which people fell in earlier times were open acts of defiance, now the most provocative sin that comes to each of us is just this temptation to wasting the time. Now, we all understand our lives in the context of a story. We all understand our lives in the context of a story. I've often said, if you ask any friend on a Monday what they did at the weekend, you can almost bet that at some point there was either a play or a book or a film. Yeah, we will sit and stare at a wall for 2 hours if a story is being projected from it. You see, we're all fascinated by the development of a narrative. And what would I do? And how will this resolve? The key then is, are you believing the true story? Are you believing the true story? You guys have all met somebody this week who was offended. Yeah? Our hearts go where they can find warmth. And if I can tell a story in which I have been hard done by someone who was so insensitive as to imagine that then I can carry around a warm sense of my own benevolence, my goodness, and injustice. People, you have all met somebody this week who was offended. And our hearts go into the same places. People in this room have been offended this week. And it felt just to dwell on it. The story we've told ourselves is how others have done us wrong. And here we see Saul, a man, giving his time to dwelling on a story which puts him in the place of the victim. Thomas Watson said, "Sin is an enemy. It is compared to a serpent. Will a man love that which seeks his death? Surely then it is better to love God than sin." When we sit dwelling on things which are not true, the Bible doesn't say, that's fine. The Bible says, sin leads to death. I was once giving out leaflets on Bethnal Green Road in East London, trying to invite people to an evangelistic event. And there was this guy coming towards me. He had a face which looked like, if I looked at him more than a few seconds, he might just kill me. He was the most angry-faced man I probably had seen that day. He looked bitter. And I thought, well, gird up your strength. And I gave the guy the leaflet, and he looked at me, and he spoke to me, and he said, you know, looking at some of the people around here, they look like they'd kill you as soon as look at you. I thought, isn't it interesting? That's what goes on inside his heart. That's what's going inside his mind. And what comes out is, well, mate, you look just like that yourself. Yeah? What goes in our hearts comes out of our mouths, says Jesus. Why? Because you were made in the image of a God who adores his Son. You were made in the image of a God who loves his Father. And your heart, as Augustine says, is restless until it finds its rest in him. You are made to know and enjoy him. And every time you are tempted, that temptation says this will taste good. This will taste good. And yeah, all right, some of you guys, it might be heroin. Some of you guys, it might be bank robberies. I know when I was growing up, that was how sin was portrayed. This guy was such a sinner. He was a heroin addict. And so we thought the good testimonies are those of Nicky Cruz and these guys who had come out of terrible drug addiction. And so we all, growing up in Sussex, said, I did once have a half of lager, but the Lord saved me out of that, you know. And that was a testimony. You get saved out of some wicked thing you've done. No one ever explained, no, your heart is going to go after something. You know, I was talking to Russell Brand. You know Russell Brand? I said to him, if you don't know him, he's kind of an outrageous comedian, stroke actor, stroke thinker, he would say. But I'm sure he's a thinker. But I said to him the night before Christmas, I said, Russell Brand, you can't wait for your present the night before Christmas. As soon as you get that thing, you'll be happy. You won't need anything else. When you've got that thing, that will complete everything. And then 3 weeks later, someone says, so what did you get for Christmas? And you go, what was it again? See, but before Christmas, that was going to change everything. Now, Russell Brand looked at me and he said, I think you're getting me at the wrong level, he said. I'm a recovering heroin addict, he said. To which I said, that's interesting. I actually worked with heroin addicts in Hong Kong. This is what helped them as well. He kind of went, because the issue is, the child before Christmas and the heroin addict and everyone in between, we are all looking for something that when you put it in your heart, out comes, wow. Wow. See? Now Saul, in this story, had got into his heart, I've been wronged. They've wronged me. You guys all know many people for whom that is the idol. And it isn't heroin. It isn't armed robbery, It's just, they've done wrong to me. They were mean to me. And that's the altar where they sacrifice themselves on a daily basis. You guys, I bet there's family breakdown in this room where it's the same issue. A dear friend of mine gave a funeral a couple of years ago, and no one at the funeral knew the guy. Some of his family showed up, but they hadn't seen him for 15 years. All because of this. They did wrong to me. They did wrong to me. They did wrong to me. The issue is, it's an issue of worship. When you are choosing to be offended, you are choosing to warm your heart at that altar. When you drift into passive entertainment like this, you're choosing to warm your heart there. Saul had ruminated, and his story, the story that Saul believed for his life, simply was not true. I plead with you. I plead with you. Here's the story which is the one that you wake up hoping in. Here's the story that your mind goes back to. Is it actually true? He wants, and he wants, and he wants. But for what? See, eternity is run by, air is given by, and life is carried on by someone who gives. Somebody who gives. Yeah? And he's fair. See, Thomas Manton said, men are ready to anger, slow to mercy, quickly inflamed, and hardly appeased. But it is quite contrary with God. It is impossible for him to be unkind. Saul, David. Now, David had been a shepherd, then a courtier, a general, and he finds himself now with the many. Now, had God called David, had he given him promises? Yes, he had. We see earlier that Samuel had selected David against his own judgment. The Lord had said, God looks on the heart, not on the outward appearance. David, he's the one I've chosen. God had given him promises, but here he's running away. He's hiding in a cave. See, William Tyndale says, if God promises riches, the way thereto is poverty. Whom he loves, him he chastens. Whom he exalts, he casts down. He promised David a kingdom and immediately stirred up King Saul against him to persecute him, to hunt him, as men do hares with greyhounds, and to ferret him out of every hole. And that for the space of many years he did this. To tame him, to meek him, to kill his lusts, to make him feel other men's diseases, to make him merciful, to make him understand that he was made king to minister and to serve his brethren, and that he should not think that his subjects were made to minister unto his lusts. If God has called you to himself, he has, in doing so, showed you the beauty of his Son. And now he isn't wasting time with you. He is only working, however, on the things that he can control together for his good. He is only working on the things that he can control to bring them together for your good. What can God control? What can God control? All things. He is only working the things that he can control together for your good. If God has called you, you have seen the beauty of Jesus. And as we were singing, he's good. He is good. His love endures forever. He is the fairest among 10,000. There is none. There is none. The most beautiful before him is a shadow. Eternity is full of his glory. Those who have seen him have fallen before him. My Lord, my God. He is the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. And if God has called you to himself, you've seen Jesus. And now he is working all things together for the good of those who love him. In the Bible, we have what was actually going on inside of David's heart and mind here. If you look at Psalm 52, the heading is to the choir master, a maskil of David. When Doeg the Edomite came and told Saul, David has come to the house of Ahimelech. So this is the internal thoughts of David during this episode. Psalm 52, page 574. Why do you boast of evil, you mighty hero? Why do you boast all day long, you who are a disgrace in the eyes of God, you who practice deceit? Your tongue plots destruction. It is like a sharpened razor. You love evil rather than good, falsehood rather than speaking the truth. You love every harmful word, you deceitful tongue. Surely God will bring you down to everlasting ruin. He will snatch you up and pluck you from your tent. He will uproot you from the land of the living. The righteous will see and fear. They will laugh at you, saying, here now is the man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted in his great wealth and grew strong by destroying others. But I am like an olive tree, flourishing in the house of God. I trust in God's unfailing love forever and ever. For what you have done, I will always praise you in the presence of your faithful people, and I will hope in your name, for your name is good. See that verse 7? Here now is the man who did not make God his stronghold, but trusted in his great wealth and grew strong by destroying others. David is running away. He is hiding in a cave with a bunch of disaffected people and saying, and yet I know that the Lord is for me. George Whitefield said, we shall often find God's providences, as it were, contradictory to his promises. Thus it was with Abraham and Jacob, and thus I believe it is in some degree or other with all the children of God. For otherwise, how could faith be exercised? We shall often find God's providences, as it were, contradicting his promises. If it was otherwise, how could faith be exercised? See, all of God's servants have felt like what he promised is being contradicted by what they saw. They've all felt that. But this is the good news. There is a true story. This is the true story. The Lord of glory, the one who runs justice and truth, the one who gives life and air, the one who created and sustains all things, the one who loves beauty, came into his creation from unimaginable glory. Why would he do that? Well, it was so that he could be bowed down to. Do you remember the time he was bowed down to? He was bowed down to by some mocking soldiers who had lately spat on him and whipped him and pulled his beard out, who had mocked him and who would soon crucify him. The true story is not, I have been wronged. Don't they understand? The true story is this: I, who have given my heart to all kinds of rubbish, I, who dwell on distractions, he came into his creation. He knew that. He came anyway. And he came to take the blame. He came to take the punishment. If God be for me, who is against me? Those who believe the true story will hold on to it in the darkness. Those who know the true story will rejoice in it. They won't just survive. They'll say, I thrive. My leaf is green. Such that people will say, what is the reason for your hope? What's going on? I thought they'd all been, why don't you gossip? Why do you put up with them? Why is it the rest of the office can see this guy's an idiot? But all I hear from you is, you're giving him another chance? None of us deserved his grace. And yet he freely gave. Not just a promise, he gave his son. And his son has taken the blame. But if he took the blame, did it work? Yeah, he was raised. He's alive. You can't mess this up. We don't have advice. We have a savior.